Our final video comes from the governor of New Jersey and explains how Christie would bring opportunity for all and favoritism to none.
Hi, I'm Governor Christie of New Jersey. Opportunity is lacking in our country right now because we've had a president and a federal government that has simply suffocated the American people with overburdening them with taxes and regulation from Washington, D.C. that's now costing every small business just to comply with regulation over $10,000 per employee. No wonder small businesses can't create the jobs that we need to put Americans back to work and to raise, for the first time in 15 years, the wages of every person in the middle class. What would I do to fix this as President of the United States? First, we would strip out every loophole and deduction in the federal tax code except for two: the home mortgage interest deduction and the deduction for charitable contributions. In return, we'd lower rates down to 28% on the high end and 8% on the low end and only have 3 rates. You could do your taxes in 15 minutes and keep much more of your money than you're keeping right now. We would also undo the heavy burden of regulation in this country. How would we do it? On day one, sitting behind the desk in the Oval Office, I would sign an executive order that would freeze any new regulation from any department or agency of the federal government, and for the next 90 days, make sure that my vice president went out and found out every burdensome regulation that had been placed on this country and its people by this administration and bring it back to me with recommendations for eliminating them. I did that in New Jersey and got rid of 1/3 of all the regulations put in place by my predecessor, and I'll do the same thing as the President of the United States. Coupling that with lower corporate taxes, we can make this economy grow again and create opportunity for everyone. The reason why the American people think the tax code is rigged for the rich is because it is. I'll fix that as President of the United States.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Governor Christie.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Eugene. Governor, your first question comes from Bill.
All right.
Governor Christie?
Yes, sir.
Republicans claim to be the party of limited government, but just this year they passed an unpaid-for doc fix that expands Medicare by hundreds of billions of dollars. What can you do to encourage members of your own party to live up to their limited government rhetoric, not just in non-binding resolutions, but in the real bills and laws that they pass?
Well, it's a really good question. I think that's why you're seeing the divide between what's happening in the states and what's happening in Washington. I really wonder, I traveled around the country last year, was here in South Carolina a lot for Governor Haley, and in every place where there was a Senate race, I was trying to help Senate candidates as well. And they told us that if they got a Republican majority in the Senate, they would change things. In 2010, they told us they got a Republican majority in the House, they would really be able to stir things up. And what I've found is that those folks go down to Washington and they seem to get amnesia. They forget about all the stuff they said to us back here, and they get down there, and I'm not somebody who opposes compromise, but I oppose capitulation. And that's capitulation. And so the way I can help to change it is to bring an attitude to the Oval Office that I've had in Trenton, New Jersey for the last 6 years. Now let me just say, we're having all this conversation about how there's members of the public who want outsiders. I'm a Republican in New Jersey, man. I'm an outsider every morning when I wake up. Every morning. I have a Democratic legislature, and they send me some of the craziest stuff you're ever going to want to hear in your life. I've now vetoed 400 bills as governor in 5.5 years, 400 vetoes, and every one of those vetoes has been sustained. They haven't overridden one of them because we stand on our principles, and when they're wrong, we say they're wrong, and that's what should be done in Washington, D.C. The veto pen will get a lot of exercise when I'm President of the United States, the same way it has when I've been governor of New Jersey. And by the way, Americans for Tax Reform just 2 weeks ago came out with a report that said that I've vetoed more tax increases than any governor in American history. Now I need a Democratic legislature to do that, but we've done it. And so what you need to be able to say to members of Congress as the president is we came here based on a certain set of principles, and we're gonna adhere to those principles. And we'll talk with the other side and work with the other side when they want to be reasonable, but when they don't, we got to dig our heels in and say no. And I am wondering now why I worked so hard to get a Republican United States Senate if they haven't passed tax reform and put it on the president's desk, if they haven't repealed and replaced Obamacare and put it on the president's desk, and if they can't defund Planned Parenthood and put that on the president's desk. What do we have them there for? And this Medicare thing is the same example. So, bottom line is, if we're waiting for Congress to provide leadership, we're going to be waiting forever. We need to elect a president who will drag them to do the things that the American people are demanding we do. And I think this is our last chance. We better do it now or it's going to be over. So we've got to get it done now.
Governor, let's talk about specifics on entitlement reform. You've talked about raising the retirement age and some means testing. What do you think of the larger structural reforms, like what Paul Ryan has proposed for Medicare or personal accounts and Social Security?
Listen, I think all those things are fine ideas, but they don't get to the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem on entitlements is this, everybody, and there's no one else in this race who's talking about this. Everyone else in this race, quite frankly, is scared to talk about it. But you better be concerned about it, because 71% of federal spending right now is on entitlements and debt service. 71%. When John Kennedy was elected president in 1960, entitlement spending and debt service was 26%. And here's the worst part of it. You're paying payroll taxes every 2 weeks in your paycheck, every 2 weeks, and they tell you it's in the Social Security Trust Fund. You remember Al Gore called this a lockbox, right? We remember that. Well, let me tell you something. I've gotten a peek into the lockbox. There's nothing but a stack of IOUs in there. The government has lied to you about the lockbox, and then they've stolen everything out of the lockbox. It's empty. And the reason I gave my first speech in this campaign on entitlement reform is because we have to change the fundamentals of it. We have to raise the retirement age. Now listen, this is a good thing, everybody. It's a blessing. The average age, life expectancy now of a woman in America is 83. The average life expectancy of a man in America is 79. I just saw a couple of you women smile. I want to remind you of something. 10 years ago, the gap was 6 years. Now it's 4. We're gaining on you. And that 4 years of vacation you were expecting at the end of your life, you may be stuck with us for the entire run. But when you have programs that are 83 and 79 in terms of life expectancy, and the programs were created when people lived only to their mid-60s, we need to accept this blessing, take possession of our longer lives, and be realistic. So I say let's raise the retirement age 2 years and phase it in over 25 years. That means it goes up 1 month a year for 25 years. It's not going to affect anybody who's on Social Security right now or right on the edge of it, but it will affect our children and our grandchildren, and it'll make it more solid for them so the program will actually be there. And second, on means testing, I say if you make over $200,000 a year in retirement income, that means you got $4 or $5 million minimum saved and invested. Do you really need a Social Security check? I mean, listen, I know you paid for it, but here's the choice, because we don't have enough money. Hillary Clinton's solution is going to be to raise Social Security taxes. Now, let me ask you a question. Why would we ever want to give the government that already lied to us and stole from us more money? And she'll say it's only the rich, right? My solution is, for those who have done very well, don't get a benefit at the end if you don't need it. Let's make sure the benefit's there for those people who that check will mean the difference between choosing between rent and heat and food. What America has always stood for is if you work hard, play by the rules, pay your taxes into the system, that we're not going to let you grow old in poverty. But remember something, Harvard and Dartmouth just came out with a study that said Social Security, if we do nothing, will be insolvent in 7 to 8 years. Not 78 years, 7 to 8 years. I'm the only one talking about this. Those other ideas are good ideas in theory. This one will fix the system immediately and give it solvency for the next 35 to 40 years.
Governor, last month you said that as a former prosecutor, you believe, quote, religious institutions should be able to decide how they conduct their religious activity, but the rest of the folks in the United States, presumably including bakers and florists, need to follow the law. Do you believe that America's First Amendment right to to the free exercise of religion is constrained to the 4 walls of a church and a synagogue?
No.
Or should practicing Christians be able to be forced to choose between operating their businesses and their beliefs?
No, absolutely not. What I said was, I don't think that's a completely accurate quote, I was talking about people who are government officials, and that folks who are in government have an obligation to do their job. Now, the situation we had in Kentucky, this is where government goes off the rails. There was a simple solution to that before they put that woman in jail and before they did all the other things they did, and they eventually got to that solution, right? Let someone else in her office issue those licenses. Don't force her to violate her own religious liberty. If those licenses are required to be issued, let someone else do it and protect her First Amendment religious liberty. What I've said is that government has the obligation to do the job and follow the law, but for everybody else, religious liberty is in the First Amendment, and it was put there for a very specific reason. We didn't want the establishment of a religion in this country, and we didn't want the abridgment of the free exercise of religion. We want people to be able to practice what they believe in their hearts and in their souls. And so the government needs to be there not to protect that liberty, but to not interfere with it. And so for the government, if there are laws that we have to enforce, you need to get people who will enforce those laws. But for everybody else, they have to be able to practice their religion the way they see fit. That's what the free exercise clause is all about. And what the establishment clause is all about is to make sure that the government does not interfere with you being able to do that. We do not want a country where someone else's religion is mandated upon us. And we don't want to mandate our religion upon anyone else. We want people to be able to do what they believe in their heart and in their soul is right for them as they observe God, as they see God. That's the kind of country we need to have. That's what we've always stood for. And that's what we not only stood for our citizens, but for the rest of the world. So let's stand up for religious liberty and make sure it's protected for everyone, because tomorrow they could be coming for you or me.
Governor, earlier this year, a family bakery in Oregon was put out of business because of tens of thousands of dollars of fines they got after refusing to cater a same-sex marriage. What would you say to that family? Would you support legislation that would ensure...
I didn't hear the first part of the question over the applause. Continue to applaud. I don't mean any... Do not let me be restrained in any way, but I didn't hear the first part of the question.
I apologize. Earlier this year, there was a family bakery in Oregon that was put out of business after tens of thousands of dollars of fines they received for refusing to cater a same-sex wedding. Would you support legislation that makes sure that that government takes no course of action against anybody for standing by their personal religious beliefs?
Listen, this is what I was just talking about before. The fact is that we can't allow any types of discrimination in this country. And the left only looks at discrimination coming from one way. There's discrimination that goes in both directions, and that shouldn't be permitted in this country. The free exercise of religion means something, and we need to be able to stand up and do the right thing for folks and protect them, as I said before, because tomorrow they could be coming after you for your religious beliefs. And so I'm not someone who feels as if anyone in this country should be discriminated against. We are a country who believes that people, as long as they're operating within the law, should have the ability to live their lives the way they want to live their lives. And I think that government should do nothing that winds up hurting that goal, because that's at the essence of who we are as a country. And so we can't have those kind of things, and I don't believe that we should.
You've spoken about your experience sending your college-age children to college. Many Americans in the same phase of life as you are worried that their kids are going to end up with a worthless degree and saddled with debt because college costs are rising so dramatically. The left's answer is to subsidize the problem. How would you address higher education as a president?
Well, listen, Mary Pat and I have 4 children, 2 of whom are in college right now. Our oldest son is a senior at Princeton. Our daughter is a sophomore at Notre Dame. Well, you applaud until you hear what the tuition is. This year, for those 2 children of ours, the tuition is $122,000. Just for those 2 children. And we have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old still coming up from behind. So you know what that means? I'm going to be working for my whole life. Here's the problem, though. For families across this country, they are saddled with enormous debt. Enormous debt. We want our children to get the best education they can possibly get. But here's the problem. Right now, we're sticking it to our children and their families in a few ways. First, the government doesn't allow these kids to refinance their loans. They're paying above market rate interest rates, 7, 8, 9%, and then they're not permitted to refinance it like you'd refinance your mortgage or a car loan if you could get a lower rate. We're making money off of our children. That's immoral in my view, and as president, I will end it. They should be able to refinance their loans and get reasonable rates that the market will bear, not the government. Second, I think our children should have a national service option to be able to serve their communities in our country and to get credit to pay down those loans in return for it. They'll make our country a better place, and we won't saddle them with huge mortgages as they go out to start their lives so they can't buy a home or get married or begin a family. But that's not the only thing we need to do. We need to get these college costs under control. How many of you out there, raise your hands, how many of you are paying college bills right now? All right. Is it the most opaque bill you've ever seen in your life? It's 3 lines, right? It's a tuition, room and board, other fees. Now, if you all went to a local restaurant tonight and you went out for dinner, and 4 of you went out and the bill came to you at the end of dinner and it was $100, and you flipped it over and it said, food, $100. And that's all it said. You would call the waiter back and say, hey, dude, come here for a second, would you? Could you write out specifically what we got and how much each one of them costs? We demand that level of specificity for a dinner bill of $100, yet I just paid a $62,000 tuition bill off of 3 lines. So 2 things we need to do to get these costs under control. First, these colleges have to be required to tell us what they're spending our money and our children's money on. You know, we don't need, I was in New Hampshire a couple weeks ago. Do you know at the University of New Hampshire they have rock climbing walls? Rock climbing walls. I was outside Mount Washington. I said, you got rocks. Go outside and climb those. What do I need to build you a wall for? But these colleges want to build monuments to themselves in every little way. We need to have them detail for us what they're spending their money on. Secondly, you've got to be able to unbundle that bill and just pay for the things that your kids are going to actually use. That would be a market test on college tuition. The things that people want to pay for, they'll keep. The things that they won't pay for are going to go away. The reason there's no market test and the reason why tuitions are going up so much, when you think about this, Notre Dame this year, their tuition is up 3.9%, and they told us it's the smallest increase in tuition in 40 years. 3.9%. That's more than double inflation. And so we need to put market forces on this because the colleges and universities know we want our kids to be happy and get a good education. They're taking advantage of us. And here's the way I'd get it done. If you're not willing to detail what you're spending your money on, and if you're not willing to allow us to unbundle the bills, then you cannot participate in the federal student loan or student grant programs. You want taxpayer money, you need to be transparent to the taxpayers and the students about what you're spending our money on. That's the way we need to bring our costs down.
Governor, our next question comes from Twitter. Beforehand, I'd note that as governor, while you did withdraw from some interstate environmental initiatives, you also told the coal industry in 2011, quote, there will be no coal permitted in New Jersey. We will no longer accept coal as a new source of power in the state. The question from Twitter is, Obama is winning his war on coal. Governor Chris Christie, what would you do to turn it around?
Well, let me first say that the reason that we said we didn't need coal plants anymore in New Jersey is because we're right next door to Pennsylvania and Marcellus Shale, and natural gas is abundant and cheap and coming to New Jersey. And because we've moved towards natural gas, we now have electricity rates in New Jersey that in the last 18 months are down 9% for consumers. We're building more pipelines and we're being smart about the energy that we're using that's abundant and luckily for us right next door. That's not the case for every place in the country. My view on the energy situation is this. We need to take an approach like New Jersey has taken. So for instance, 53% of New Jersey's electricity is generated by nuclear power. 53%. We need to go back to nuclear because it makes sense, it's cheap, it's inexpensive, and we need to go back and start building nuclear plants again. I talked about natural gas and the fact that we have a 100-year supply of natural gas under the United States, and we have a way to bring it to the surface. We can absolutely transform manufacturing in this country by making our power rates so much cheaper that we can compete with the Chinese on cost because of our lower power rates and create new manufacturing jobs here in the United States. We need to be doing that as part of our energy policy as well. Third, where coal is abundant and can be used, it should be used. There's no reason that it shouldn't be used, and states should have the opportunity to make those judgments as to what energy source is most available to them. And by the way, if you want to win a bet tonight at dinner, ask someone, what are the top 3 solar energy producing states in America? The first 2 they'll get, California and Arizona. The third one is New Jersey. The third highest producing of solar energy in the country. Why? because we allowed the private sector to come in and make it affordable. And so now businesses and homes in New Jersey are using solar power as another option. We need to be exploring for oil in this country. We need to be exploring for natural gas. We need to be using coal when we can. We've got to revitalize nuclear. And by the way, we're not going to have wind energy in New Jersey. We're the most densely populated state in America. We start putting windmills on land in New Jersey, there's going to be a lot of really angry, cranky people, even more than we have already. We can't afford that. We should use the alternative energies that make sense for each state. In Iowa, it makes sense to have wind power. They have lots of big open space. In New Jersey, we don't. And by the way, offshore wind, no one has shown me yet that it's affordable. And you know who's going to get stuck with the bill if we start doing offshore wind. It's going to be you are going to be stuck with the bill. I've stood up against that in New Jersey. We're not going to let it happen. And one last thing. The northeastern states had a regional cap and trade agreement when I came into office in 2010. Cap and trade by states, all the northeastern states. There's only one of the northeastern states now that doesn't. New Jersey, because I pulled this out of cap and trade because it's a tax on people. It doesn't work. I won't let it happen as governor, and I will not let it happen as president of the United States.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Governor Haley.
Thank you, and welcome back to South Carolina, Chris. It's good to see you.
Great to see you.
So, what does everybody need to know about this man? We owe him a big thank you. And the reason is, when he led the Republican Governors Association, he fought, he won. We now have a Republican governor in Massachusetts. We now have a Republican in Maryland. And guess what? When President Obama goes home to Illinois, we now have a Republican governor in Illinois.
That's right.
He fought hard. He said we could win blue states. He showed us how to do it. But there's certain perceptions people have about blue states. And there's something that I know that you happen to be a very pro-life governor. When you have looked at these Planned Parenthood tapes, what does it do to you and what do you think about it?
Well, I'm the first pro-life governor in New Jersey since Roe versus Wade. And when I ran for governor in New Jersey, all the political pundits said there was no way I could win because I was pro-life. And they're wrong. They were wrong twice. And the fact is that there are more people in our country who are pro-life than the pollsters and the pundits ever want to admit to. But what they want more than anything else out of their leaders is honesty. What do you believe in my heart? And what I believe in my heart is that every life is an individual gift from God and is precious and needs to be protected. And you know what? We've all seen those Planned Parenthood videos, and I'm not going to go through what they said. You know what they said and what they're doing. Here's the one question that I guarantee you, when I'm the nominee of this party, I will put to Hillary Clinton on the stage in October of 2016 when we're debating. She talks about women's health and us being against women's health, which is completely ridiculous. I say to her, Mrs. Clinton, don't try to change the subject. Here's what I want to know. Are you in favor of the systematic murder of children in the womb in a specific way that allows your organization that you support to maximize the value of their body parts on the open market for profit? Answer it yes or no, Mrs. Clinton. Stop evading the issue. The fact is that no right-thinking person in America believes that we should systematically kill children in the womb and sell their body parts for profit. It is heinous, it is reprehensible, and I will not permit it as President of the United States. And by the way, another reason why the Congress is driving me crazy is that 6 years ago, in one of the bluest states in America, I defunded Planned Parenthood. I vetoed Planned Parenthood funding 8 times. They haven't gotten a nickel in New Jersey for the last 6 years. If I can do it in New Jersey, there's no reason our party can't do it in Washington, D.C. But one last thing I want to remind you, as conservatives and as Republicans, we are the pro-life party, and if we're going to be pro-life, we have to be pro-life for the entire life. It's not enough to be pro-life just when they're in the womb. You know, when they come out, that's when they start to disappoint us, right? And it becomes much harder. We need to be pro-life for the 16-year-old drug addict on the floor of the county lockup, because that life is precious too. That life is an individual gift from God. And that's why I believe in drug rehabilitation. It's a disease and we need to help people. There's probably not a person in this room who hasn't had a family member or a friend or a coworker or a neighbor who's been affected by drug and alcohol abuse, and some that may have lost their lives to it. We can't permit that to continue to happen in this country, because every life is precious. Every life is precious. The elderly's lives is precious too. And I will never permit in New Jersey or in this country assisted suicide. It is for God to determine when life is taken, not for us. So, listen everybody, we allow ourselves to play on the Democrats' playing field. They think that pro-life just means for those 9 months in the womb, and they want to have an argument about that. Let me end by reminding you this. Pro-life has to be for the whole life, and when we start talking about those issues as part of a pro-life agenda, we're going to bring more people over to the pro-life side, more people to our cause and our party, and make America a better, safer, and more moral country. That's what I want to do as President of the United States.
Great job. One last question. We talked about, workers and how they all had to focus on their own job. And this has been coming up as everybody's focused on everybody else's job, but everyone across America, especially middle class, they have to focus on their own job. You look back at 1980, and Ronald Reagan won those middle class blue collar jobs. If you look at 2012, President Obama won those middle class blue collar jobs. How did you win in the state of New Jersey those blue collar jobs?
Well, let me just remind you something, okay, to tell you how blue New Jersey is, because I know here in South Carolina you cannot relate to this at all. It's a disorienting thing, so I don't want you to get dizzy and fall over, but just listen to this now. We have 750,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans. We had not elected anyone, any Republican, to statewide office before I ran in 2009 in 12 years. And we have not elected a Republican to the United States Senate in 43 years. It's the longest streak of any state in America. So don't tell me California or New York is bluer than us. There's no one bluer than the state of New Jersey. So what am I doing here? Am I a historical accident? What happened? I'll tell you what happened. I spoke my mind. And the way you get to middle class voters is if they believe that you're telling them the truth as you see it, whether they like it every day or not. If they believe that when you tell them you're going to do something, you'll do it, and when you tell them you won't, you won't. And when you reach out to other people of all different stripes, and you don't change your story when you get there. That's what they're used to from politicians. So when I'm in front of a group where I know there's a bunch of pro-choice people, I don't say I'm pro-choice. I tell them I'm pro-life. You can disagree with me if you want, but this is who I am. When I walk into a place where I know they like bigger government, I don't change my story. I tell them that we eliminated 800 programs as governor of New Jersey and have vetoed every tax increase, because if they don't like that, then there's going to be someone else to vote for. And what have the results of all this been when they said that I was an accident in 2009 just because John Corzine was an awful governor? And believe me, he was. We do benefit from who we run against. 4 years later, they said they were going to take me out. What happened 4 years later? I was reelected with 61% of the vote in a state like New Jersey. Pundits in this country say that we can't win Hispanic voters. I won 51% of the Hispanic vote in New Jersey when I was reelected. We won 22% of the African American vote, up from 9%, and running against an 18-year female state senator, we won 56% of the female vote. Whether you are black or white or Hispanic, whether you're a man or a woman, you know what you want from people in public office? For them to work hard and tell you the truth and not pander and change their story. They'll vote for anybody who does that for them, and that's what I'll do as president.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's not just a fighter, he's a winner. Help me welcome Governor Chris Christie.
Thank you.